Our final presentation this morning will be on the changing modes of listening. Ralph's already touched on some of those points. Like technology is creating all sorts of ways in which audio is consumed. And it's created incredible growth and interest in audio, which is fantastic for radio, radio being the lead medium in that audio space. However, with all these new areas that need to be investigated, what are these new ways of listening? How do we, what does it mean for advertisers, and what are the opportunities that can be exploited there by advertisers in that space? To lead this presentation, we have James Butcher, who's the Head of Digital Audio at NZME, and we've got Richie Culph, who is the Rova Content Director at MediaWorks. Richie, James, please come to the stage.
Great, a big clicker. Yeah, sweet.
Shouldn't get in a fight over this, should we?
No. Thanks, Ralph. That was amazing stuff. But you've obviously never heard Magnus Benrow and the Mad Butcher, so we'll update your prezzo for that later on.
Thanks so much for having us here, guys. I faced a little bit of a personal dilemma last night at about 8:30. My obsession with the cricket and watching start to finish of the third day, or my own personal brand and professional reputation and my ability to stand up here and cohesively talk about something which is quite complex. Thankfully, that decision was taken out of my hands due to the wonderful English weather. But anyway, here we are. Hey, look, it's great to be here. It's not often that both MediaWorks and NZME are up on the same stage together, even though we seem to have the same policy when it comes to headshots.
Same dress code.
Same dress codes, although you're looking sharper. But I also think it's a bit of a sign of the times and the changing competitor ecosystem, and some of the forces that are coming down from big global organisations and how they're disrupting audio in general. And I think it's great to be sharing the stage up here with MediaWorks today.
Awesome. So we're going to take you through a few things today. The digital audio landscape. So what was the genesis of digital audio and how we've ended up here? We're going to look at changing listening habits and examine why they're changing and where they're going. We're going to talk about the great things that digital is doing for radio, touching on podcasts and smart speakers and better outcomes for brands. And finally, we'll take a look over the horizon and see what exciting things are on the way for listeners and advertisers.
Great, but to kick off, let's have a little look back, right? Radio's been with us since 1895, right? And despite rumours, that's a lot longer than I've been here. And we've seen quite a few radio disruptors, or should we call them radio killers, from all the way starting off in the mid-1990s. And there's some wonderful nostalgic brands there, right? Napster, right? And how that changed the way that people were going to consume music. All the way through to iTunes, who tried to kind of legalize the way that people were consuming music from the internet. Then through to Spotify, right? And Spotify now creating that concept that you didn't actually have to buy music anymore. You could just subscribe to it. Don't know how well that's worked out for the artists, but that's another story. New formats landing in 2004 with the concept of the podcast developing and that coming to market. All the way through to where we are today. There's been numerous sort of radio killers that have landed within the last 25 years, yet we are here today with a really strong, vibrant, and healthy commercial radio industry. And so what is the digital audio ecosystem today? And I think there's some perception out there that as soon as people go to digital audio, they immediately go to music streaming. And the ecosystem's far more diverse, far more complex, and I guess far more interesting than just music streaming, right? On the left-hand side, we've got this concept of online radio, right? That is people who still love consuming, engaging, and connecting with radio. They're just no longer doing it terrestrially, right? They are now connecting with that content on a device, right? Every single person in this auditorium has a radio on them, right? And that's kind of a crazy concept to think about. That never happened when I was back at university, right? But not only is online radio still a great way for people to access that content, it's giving people more access. It's allowing people to access it on their terms, at their times of the day, allowing them to catch up on that morning's content if they missed out on it, or if they love listening to a particular station and they want to hear more of that type of sound, then that kind of concept of extension brands and extension streaming offerings is another great thing that the digitalization of radio has brought. Yes, music streaming is a big part of the audio ecosystem, right? And that is that disruption on the transaction that we all used to make with our CD stores, right? That concept of going down and buying that new album, taking it home, putting it into your multi-disc player, and then trying to create playlists off the back of that, right? Music streaming has removed the need for that transaction, and it's allowing people to access on demand, you know, the CD, the artist, the album, the song, or the particular playlist they want at that moment in time. We're also seeing a lot more content and consumption within the podcast ecosystem. We'll talk a little bit about this in more detail later on, but podcasting as a form of storytelling or a form of entertaining or a form of even educating and informing people is absolutely a growing form of audio. And then finally, there's this kind of catch-all of what will be next. And Ralph kind of touched on it a little bit before, and Richie's going to go into this in some detail. But just the concept of kind of voice as a remote control and how that's giving us more access to content. You know, audio books, the concept of narration. We're even starting to see platforms such as social audio coming out from Silicon Valley with Clubhouse, etc. We're only going to see more innovation, more disruption, and more opportunity in the audio space. But within all of that disruption, right, is how people are accessing and consuming this content. Radio still plays a really integral role, right? And nothing has said that more than what we've experienced as a society and as a species, dare I say it, over the last sort of 12 and 24 months. Right? When the government needed to get vital information out to the populace, you know, radio was a really important channel for delivering that communication. Speed to being able to get out there, you know, scale, efficiency and effectiveness, you know, all those types of things that we talk about radio commercially was why radio was such a strong part of our experiences through COVID, and then I guess even more recently with the tsunami that threatened coastal regions of the North Island. You know, radio was still a great channel for the government to communicate with its citizens. There we go. And what we're going to talk about today is not that audiences are leaving radio and just consuming digital, it's that audio or the digitalization of radio is creating new opportunity. Yes, there are more people that are starting to stream audio, and we think that represents a great opportunity for broadcasters such as ourselves, but also for listeners in terms of accessing that content that they love, and what we're going to start seeing increasingly for brands in terms of how they can engage and reach those audiences.
Thanks, James. Cool, so listening habits are definitely changing, and let's go into a bit of detail about that right now. Some nice big numbers to kick it off. These are around New Zealand weekly listening habits. They are from Nielsen CMI because we wanted to get some consistent data points. They might look a little bit different to the GfK numbers that you're used to, just slightly. So radio is still one of the most consumed broadcast mediums per week at 80%. 26% of that is now being done on digital platforms. Quite a big change. 32% of Kiwis stream music weekly through channels like Spotify, YouTube, and so on. And just 13% of Kiwis are listening to podcasts at least once a week. So big numbers there, but the hype around around music and podcasts might sort of outweigh the actual reality, right? So why are habits changing? As devices and content continue to proliferate, consumers expect to be able to listen on their choice of platform, on their schedule, and on their terms. And what does that mean in terms of audio content? When we're talking about platform, that could be a radio station. It could be on an app, not just on a phone, but on a TV, on a set-top box. On an external device, so that's on Bluetooth in your car or on a speaker, Chromecasted to a device, or Apple AirPlay to a device. And of course, smart speakers, so Google Home and Alexa and Sonos and through there. And we can look at schedule. They might want to listen live because they never want to miss a show or an episode. Or they might want to get an update about that, make sure they're getting they're told when the new content's available, so they're first on it. You might want to listen on demand, so on their schedule via podcast in terms of audio. So when they're ready to download it and take it somewhere, maybe that's outside of mobile coverage and data is still a concern in New Zealand. They might want to listen to it time shifted. So that's in terms of if you've got a Vodafone TV, you know how easy that is just to rip it back. And that same thing is happening right now for radio. And they will listen to it on their terms. So that might be with or without ads. Apple has launched paid podcast subscriptions within the last couple of months. that might be wanting to switch from audio to a video stream. So on Joe Rogan, for example, at any time you press a button, you switch to video. Same for YouTube Music. You'd be listening to the music, switch it over to that music video anytime you like. That kind of thing is possible with our live shows right now on radio. And then what interaction? So of course you can call or text a radio station, and you might be on Twitch and you're chatting to somebody on video games. Or it could be in the terms of Clubhouse or Green Room, and those things are just starting to come out now. They might want it enriched with metadata, and what metadata is that's the information that's delivered alongside the audio to enrich it, so you can, for example, have chapter markers to skip directly to exactly where you want to go within that audio. Of course, show notes and podcasts, so links out for products, events, or further content. So let's zoom in a bit, and this is from the Infinite Dial Australia, released in April. So it's Australian data comparing with US. So Australia's in the green and the US is in blue. So you can see that radio is still remaining really strong in the car. Online streaming music from the likes of Spotify, which again gets a lot of hype, are actually still in the car, only as popular as CDs, and podcasts are still trailing both. And again, that's because of the mobile data. It's much more affordable in other countries as compared to New Zealand, but you can still see the uptake is still slow. So platforms are evolving to digital. Thanks to technology and enabling innovation, the endpoints are growing, user habits are changing, and the traditional platforms are redefining themselves. And no platform is going to be exempt. Radio is not any different. So first, of course, Yellow Pages has basically changed into search engines. Yellow has their business model has evolved their business model to online. Newspapers still exist, but their digital footprint far exceeds their paper footprint. And as internet bandwidth has increased in the home, TV's evolved into the on-demand world and is now delivering more live content via their digital platforms. And now it's radio's turn to evolve. We've held out really well. The wave is now coming for us, and we're ready to embrace it. We're evolving into live and on-demand audio. So having a look at the effects of COVID on this change. Obviously, the push is always to digital, but COVID really accelerated this, and we can see this with data out of the States. So in the US, digital device listening of radio was already high at 45%. That's 45% of all radio listening being done on a digital or on-demand capable device. So that data point earlier was 23% where we're at in New Zealand right now. It's like a mobile phone. So that's opposed to a linear or non-digital platform, for example, like a car radio or an old kitchen radio if you've still got one of those. So COVID pushed it up by 8% over the halfway mark and pretty much flipped it around. So in the US, it's now more common for somebody to be listening to radio on a digital platform as opposed to a traditional linear platform. And here's how COVID affected our platforms, and some really similar results there. If you're having a look at those red lines, that's where the big lockdowns were, and you can see almost mirror results there on both of our platforms. Remarkably similar. Cool. Passing back to James.
And so we're getting some new consumption habits, right? Some new access points, and as Richie mentioned, we think that's creating some really interesting new opportunities for the industry. And we're going to touch on one of the major ones within that, podcasts. Who here listens to podcasts? Yeah. Much bigger percentage, and I recognise this is not a fair representation of the country, much bigger representation which is currently being claimed in a lot of research and a lot of survey data in terms of podcast consumption. What we do know though is that it's a media and a channel that is absolutely growing, right? It's absolutely growing. These are the trends from the Infinite Dial that we see in other markets at the moment. So this is coming from a monthly number. In the US, 41% of Americans are consuming a podcast on a monthly basis. In Australia, that is at 37%. Australia has seen year-on-year growth that took the US 4 years to achieve. Right? So you can see this trend is really starting to accelerate. And we think radio's in a really natural place to develop this channel further. Right? We produce audio content on a daily, hourly, minutely basis. We're producing and streaming content live across multiple stations across the nation right now. right? We are the industry and we are the channel that has the biggest opportunity, I think, to really evolve into the podcasting space. But it's challenging, right? I've got this kind of concept of content without borders. Back in the old traditional media days, we all really stayed in our lanes, right? And we all stayed within our nations. You know, perhaps through people like Sky, you'd get a lot more access to global content. You know, the TV channels, they would buy in the various shows and it was programmed and you watched what you could watch. But within an audio ecosystem, you know, particularly for radio, you listen to predominantly local radio shows, which had a lot of global and international music, etc. But it was still a very local experience. Now, when it comes to podcasts, we can all access pretty much any podcast we want right now, right? And there's a shitload of content out there. One of the best things about podcasts is it's actually pretty easy to produce. Like, we could all get together right now, grab a microphone, start recording, shove the file on a CMS, and it'll probably be up by this evening, right? Which is great, but it's also a nightmare, right? Because there's a lot of content out there. Here's a couple of big numbers for you. Apparently there's about 2.16 million podcast series out there. And that's comprised of around about 51.9 million podcast episodes. Let's compare that to some music catalogs. I think Spotify's music catalog's about 70 million. Apple's catalog's about 75 million. We are not miles away, given this medium's only been around since, what, 2005-ish? We are not far away from there being more podcast episodes out there than music, right? So there's an enormous amount of global content out there that is available and accessible. Similar to what we're trying to do as an industry is we want to make sure that New Zealand content, right, has a really strong and healthy place to play in this ecosystem. And it's a complicated ecosystem. And this is kind of what makes podcasting somewhat challenging, I guess, from a commercial standpoint, and also how we try to work with brands and content makers. I liken it as to being, or I describe it often as being the most opt-in media out there. Right? One of the easiest things, like I said, to do is to produce a podcast. One of the hardest things to do is to get someone to listen to your podcast. The reason for that is they have to find it. They have to like the look of it or the sound of it. They have to subscribe to it or follow it. They then have to download the episodes. And then they have to play and consume the episodes. That's a lot of opt-in for a listener, and particularly in this sort of modern day where we're all too busy to basically be doing anything. That's a big ask on people, right? So let's talk a little bit about how that works. A user finds your podcast, you start to subscribe and follow it. That podcast or that podcatcher goes back to the content system where that podcast lives, the CMS system, and every time a new episode is made available, that file is passed back to the podcatcher, right? What happens from a commercial standpoint is when we go to pass the latest podcast episode to the podcatcher, our CMS system will go, oh, can I put some ads in here? Like, who am I serving this to? What's some relevant messaging that I can put around this podcast, and be it in a pre, a mid, or a post roll? So at that point, we'll grab some wonderful recorded advertising messages with the environmental context of listening taken into consideration, and I love that message. And we'll pass that singular file back to the podcatcher as one file. It then gets downloaded onto that listener's phone, and wherever they are in their day and they choose to listen to that podcast, that messaging is baked into part of that, right? So that creates quite a complicated ecosystem, right? Because if you've gathered, we've been sort of talking about streaming platforms as being somewhat of a competitor in this space. From a podcasting standpoint, they're kind of a frenemy, right? So both us and MediaWorks make all of our content available agnostically, right? We take an audience-first approach when it comes to producing this content. It's important for our brands and for the editorial that we're producing to be available for our audiences. And we distribute those podcasts across all those podcatchers. So when a listener's consuming any of our shows, be it on Spotify, be it on Apple, that listen is attributed back to the content maker. And that advertising that is inserted, again, is attributed to that editorial and that content maker. Which makes it pretty challenging from a measurement standpoint as well, right? There's not a singular view of podcast consumption in this market, what podcatchers are trending the best, and what are the most popular and most listened to local shows. And that makes it really difficult when you're out there talking to advertisers and agencies and marketers around how great an opportunity podcasting is for brands to go within. A couple of industries or a couple of markets have addressed that with the concept of a podcast ranker. This is what is in Australia at the moment, and it basically provides, similar to what Radio Survey does for radio consumption, it provides a singular total view of the podcasting industry in New Zealand. What shows are being listened to by Kiwis, what's the most popular, how many are getting downloaded, and who's the commercial entity that represents those in market.
And we are happy to announce today that thanks to Triton Digital and the RBA and the cooperation of industry, the New Zealand Podcast Ranker is going to launch in October. So it'll be a lot easier for industry, the entire industry, not just NZME and MediaWorks, to have those conversations. We can talk about value and talk about growth of podcasting and really be part of that growth. So moving on to something else we're excited about is the growth of smart speakers, and they've been talked about a bit already today. So we're not the only ones excited. You've probably seen the Spark ads for Generation Voice. These are our kids getting pumped about smart speakers. I myself have got them in every single room of my house, and my kids would use them 30 to 50 times a day. And there's all our kids up there enjoying it. Only one of James's kids must be his favourite one.
The other one can't be tied down reliably enough for a single shot.
So let's take a step back and just understand how smart speakers are part of radio's evolution in the home. Because before TV took all the credit for warping minds, they have these massive monolithic radios rotting brains in living rooms across the world. And as TV took the lounge and the households got busier, radio moved into the kitchen, allowing families to keep up with the news and be entertained. And again, as lots of people have spoken about today, I think every single person, while they're doing something else. Then it's into your pocket with the Walkman. And now smart speakers have brought radio into any room that you want to put them in. So as voice interaction comes of age, or as a lot of people would probably say, if you've ever used one in the last couple of years, becomes not so shit, smart speaker ownership is increasing rapidly, bringing information, entertainment, and smart home controls to every room. Music is a very popular use case for smart speakers. Users listen to dramatically more audio than they did before purchasing one of them. And there's a great data point there from a couple of years ago out of the UK. 34% of smart speaker owners spending more than 4 hours a day listening to music, compared to 24% of the general population. 42% increase just off the back of buying a smart speaker. Another thing to remember here is while more control with smart speakers and being an on-demand environment is liberating, it can also be stressful. So creating and accessing music playlists on different platforms, relying on algorithms that never quite get things right, or facing analysis paralysis, which you've probably heard about through Netflix, you know, that little play anything button. When you just sit there in front of Netflix every night looking 20 minutes, scrolling, looking at synopses, and then James just chucks on the notebook again. So radio continues to provide an answer here in the audio space. Looking at some numbers around smart speaker ownership, and again, it's the infinite dial here. So in the US, 33% of the population own a smart speaker. Australia at 26%, only a year behind the US. CMI data that we've got for this in New Zealand from 2020 is 8.6%. So it's still trailing, but of course, there's only going to go in one direction. Once you're into this world also, you do tend to get deeper. So of those who own at least one smart speaker, the average number of units in Australia is 1.9, and in the US is 2.2. And in fact, in the US, if you have at least one smart speaker, you're more likely to have two or more. So it's pretty clear they're not going anywhere. James.
I love the Netflix paralysis example, and it reminds me there was a innovation that came out of Netflix France, where they had an insight that if you spent more than 30 seconds looking for what to watch, the drop-off rate from you leaving Netflix was ferociously high, and I think we can all recognise that behaviour. Right, so to counter that, they came up with this new product, and what it was effectively, let's call it a channel. And so rather than searching for something that you wanted to watch, you could go to this channel within Netflix where someone has programmed what you could watch within that channel, right? So everybody who was watching that channel at the same time was effectively watching the same content. And they released that as a great innovation to kind of cover for that. People leave and you're like, fuck, you've just reinvented TV. Like, that's amazing. That is literally TV without ads. right? But it's an interesting insight, and again, we're talking about this in the context of audio streaming versus music, etc. Like that programmed experience, people still want, right? People still crave it. Anyway, the digitalization of audio and radio, we've spoken about that being a great thing, podcasting, new formats, smart speakers, creating greater access, you know, new moments and opportunities, but, you know, a big part of this industry is brands, right? And digitalization of audio is creating new opportunity for brands as well. This is taken from our friends Spotify, and also from, they did some research with IPG investment arm Magna in the US. This is recent research. I believe this was done within the last couple of months, but it's coming out with the concept that people are starting to get screen fatigue. And this is one of those kind, you know, you get so much research and insights though, and sometimes you take it and you kind of wash it against your own behavior and your own consumptions, and you go, yeah, that rings true. You know, I quite often talk about my mobile phone as being my guilt media. You know, you're on it and you know you shouldn't be. Like how often do people check their phones and this going, I'm distracted, I'm looking at something else, but I'm also conscious that I should be listening to these two really interesting guys at the front of the room, interesting and handsome guys. You know, because and I think COVID created a lot of this, right? It forced people indoors and to kind of reevaluate some of their life decisions, so we say. And as people come out, and we're lucky in New Zealand, right? I'm talking very international here. You know, people are looking to reconnect with society, with their lives, and getting back out there and going back out into the wild, right? And there's this kind of concept of screen fatigue. Like people are getting tired, and it's not just people in their late to mid-30s like myself, but you know, the younger generation are experiencing this as well. So this study said that Gen Z, 70%, 72% of people are currently claiming that they have screen fatigue, right? That kind of, I've got to get away from my screen. And getting back out into society, should we say, what is the media and channel that is your kind of companion? What is the one that is the ultimate media to consume on the go, right? It's radio, it's audio, it's podcasting, it's everything that we've been talking to you guys about today. So radio's great, but what if you could do it digitally, right? So all the great things that radio gives you, you know, local, you know, big reach, you know, it's loved, you know, the talent, etc., how effective it is. But what if we were able to transact it digitally? Right? And there's a lot of benefits that transacting media digitally brings you. Right? It allows you to be measurable. It allows you to be interactive. It allows you to look at the environment that you're turning up in and talk to the consumer in a different context. Right? It allows you to be dynamic. And it allows you to be addressable. It allows you to be one-to-one in who you're talking to and understand who that audience is that is on the other end of the phone, speaker, headphone, whatever we're calling. But it is a bit of a shift for us to kind of get our heads around, right? I mean, people are still consuming radio, but that delivery of one-to-many versus one-to-one creates challenges, and it also creates opportunities for us. And do you know what? There's some brands doing some really great work in this space in New Zealand, and we're going to share a couple of examples from the one brand in New Zealand across both our platforms. But there was a campaign that Corona ran recently, right? And everyone knows the phrase Corona from where you'd rather be. You know, that kind of insight of getting people to play on whatever they're doing at the moment. Wouldn't they much rather be on a beach in Mexico drinking a Corona? And so what we did is we took people's context from where they were, and we looked at their proximity to a particular beach. We looked at those surf conditions for that particular beach at that moment in time, and we kind of gave them a personalized surf report. And it was kind of like Corona. Wouldn't you rather be surfing at the beach because the surf's good at the moment? I'll play you an audio message of just one example of how that sounds for some poor soul in Mount Maunganui who's not drinking a Corona at the beach.
From where you'd rather be is today's surf report brought to you by Corona. For Mount Maunganui, north-northeast winds, blowing at over 15 knots, with swells between 3 and 4 meters. And that's today's surf report, brought to you by Corona, from where you'd rather be.
So that's just a piece of dynamic content that we've delivered within context of that listener's where they currently are at that moment in time. And as you listen to that audio, you can start to pick up on all the various aspects of that can be made dynamic. Now we're delivering a piece of content there. You can also do it in a kind of a more traditional commercial messaging standpoint as well. So we're ingesting the location, we're ingesting the name of the beach, we're ingesting the wave height, the wind direction, the swell size. You kind of get the point. But You're recording those micro aspects of that creative and then basically stitching it together to sound like a really seamless, singular, personalized piece of creative in a channel which is traditionally really mass and broadcast. Right? And that's kind of what the digitalization of radio allows us to do.
Super exciting. And here's what you can do just within a platform and locally. This on Rova, the same client, the same objective here. We're able to give them a place within our ecosystem. They're on our carousel on Rova. They're really heroes that space. Then we promote them with app notifications and DAI and social and on air. So just some great examples there of two different ways that you can use digital via radio. So let's look at some more exciting stuff and take a look over the horizon into the future. So what does it mean? What's next for advertisers and listeners? For advertisers, it's smarter dynamic ads, as James has just given an example of. And dynamic ads create some really exciting possibilities, and one of those is interactive voice. So having voice ads that can have a conversation with you, you can track listeners' feelings about brands and deliver actionable outcomes straight away. And I'll show you a demo of this in a sec. Also, synthesized voice. Listening to that creative just before that James played, obviously somebody had to record all those separate versions. With a synthesized voice, as that technology really starts to come of age, you can just type it out. So you can just choose a voice and it sounds that good or even better. And a great example of this you can look up is Google Duplex, which you can just say to Google, book me a restaurant at 7 o'clock tonight, and it will make that call and have a voice interaction with that restaurant and book that table. And that's available right now in New Zealand if you have a Pixel phone. So for listeners, more entry points and experiences. You can share a timestamp or clip of your favorite podcast directly or on social platforms, and Spotify started timestamp sharing just last month. There's going to be more shared audio experiences and interaction through platforms like Clubhouse, and rewindable radio, which is on the horizon for us. Scrolling back on live content to hear what you missed, or choosing your entry point quickly and easily. And let's run through that experience right now. So this is the SiriusXM radio app in the States. They've had rewindable radio for quite a few years. I'm a big Howard Stern fan. So I'm opening up the Howard Stern channel now, and straight away we're taken to what's playing out on live radio. Do I click that?
In the last 2 years, have you heard passed away from the flu? How many cold symptoms have you heard of?
What has this got to do with the COVID
as far as the UI allows?
No, not until I'm finished.
And then I can go back to listening live by pressing that live button.
It's the big fear. Tell me what your problem is.
Or I can scroll down and see a list of chapter markers. So I can see what I'm interested in, and then just go directly to that.
What do you think's going to happen?
And I really want to see what Ask Napkin Ed's up to, so let's tap that one.
Because I'm such a great guy. No, I was telling you.
Really exciting stuff, right? So again, with metadata and a bit of app development, all the other technology behind it is actually already there. So taking a look at interactive voice ads, and again, this technology is available now. So this is a demo ad for a fast food outlet. So imagine we're listening to the radio on our smartphone or our smart speaker, and then we hear this ad play.
You're hungry, and you need to do a lot today. You're probably thinking of a tasty burger, but you want it to be healthy. Well, we have something for you. Just let us know if you want to know what we're talking about.
So then we're given a couple of seconds to respond. I love burgers, so I'm going to say yes. That registers as interest, as the intent, and then the ad responds.
Our best restaurant chain has introduced the new organic fresh burger. So much green, it feels like I'm eating a salad, but it's a burger, which is as healthy as a bowl of salad. You can get it today. We're opening a map with all the nearby restaurants. Come on over for a taste and healthy.
What a dream, burger like a bowl of salad. And so everything that's happened there is obviously, what was my intent when I heard that? That's been captured and can be delivered back to the brand. And then you can build that profile and talk to that listener in different ways. Maybe they don't like burgers. Maybe they want to hear about something else next time. And you can do that in dynamic ads and with voice interaction. Some people do find it a little bit creepy, but I've got a Google Home in my toilet, so I'm sweet as. All right, so in summary of what we've been through today, As listening habits are changing, what are the opportunities for radio as it evolves into digital audio? For radio listeners, digital audio enables consumption of their favorite shows on their schedule in more places, and importantly, again, while we're doing something else, and we've heard today how effective that is. It's at the gym, mowing the lawn, on your Xbox while playing Fortnite. All of those places, you can now listen to digital audio.
And it's clearly creating new opportunity for brands as well. You know, taking everything that's so effective about radio and how can we deliver it digitally, and what is the new creativity and the new opportunities that generates in terms of the way that we marry message with the channel that we're turning up in and the listener that we're talking to. Great opportunities for brands, and we're looking forward to working with the industry in terms of how we can bring more innovation to commercial opportunities in radio.
And for radio broadcasters like us, we're well placed to use our existing strengths in audio and music programming to create high quality digital audio content. And high quality is really important here, because although it is very easy to create a podcast, as lots more become available, the bar is going to be higher, then people will expect more. And of course, radio is very good at creating high quality high quality audio, and we are ready to deliver on that.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.